All right. Welcome, everyone. It's beautiful to see the house full, to be here all together for another lecture. Thank you for all of you that are over the internet who are watching us today. Today, we're going to have a lecture from our friend Marco. But before that, as always, we're going to have our initial reading with our friend Danielle. And then we're going to have our initial prayer with our friend Leo. Okay? So, Danny, if you can please come and read for us, that would be wonderful.
You're good. Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'll start reading. Jesus said, "Do not let your heart be grieved," teaching that calmness and belief in God should be the watchwords of any individual desiring to find happiness. There are always reasons for worry, disquieting the heart, and perturbing life. Human existence is an opportunity to appreciate eternal riches and inner enlightenment. If you turn your anxieties over to God and trust Him with your life, everything will turn out all right. And if something disturbing does occur, serenity will take charge of the situation and all will be well. For this reason, do not let your heart or mind be unsettled by the unfortunate occurrences. Thank you.
I would like to invite you all to elevate our thoughts to Master Jesus, to all good spirits that are surrounding us now. Support the person who's gonna put the lecture. That all the words that are there could resonate with us, and we could take these for our break. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So thank you all for being here. Always a blessing for us to have these meetings together on Sundays. And today, more importantly today, because now we're approaching this very important time when our planet is going around the sun in a particular location that we celebrate a lot of things. There's the solstice, the winter solstice coming up very soon. We have very short days. Lots of celebration happened many years ago, as you know that in history. But most importantly, we're celebrating the date that we decided on the calendar to be the date that Jesus incarnated here with us, right? So we're getting closer and closer to that date. But also important for us as a Spirit Center here because we kind of slow down a little bit the activities during this time of year. So we'll continue the mediumship groups, the study groups a little bit more, but then we're going to have a little break with winter and we'll start everything again next year with our planning day, right? So why not, right? This is considering all this important time of the year that we're going through. Talk about a message of kindness and hope, right? I think those are two important things that all of us, right, are basically overflowing with at least an idea of intent or full of an idea of kindness and hope for a new year and thinking about positivity in this end of the year, considering everything that's going around us, right? Which are a lot of difficult things, right? And in order to do that, talk about a little bit of kindness today. So I decided to take a few examples that are brought to us through different books, different stories. And we're going to start with a passage that I really, really like. This passage is from the book Jesus in the Home. And this is by the spirit Neo Lucio that wrote through the hands of Francisco Cândido Xavier, Chico Xavier. And this book is really, really important in a way because it talks about moments of teaching of Jesus that are not captured otherwise in many of the other traditional books that we read, for example, the New Testament or the Bible. And it gives like a first view understanding of what was happening during those teaching sessions, because probably, as you guys could imagine, a lot more happened when Jesus was incarnated here, right? Every day, every time he was teaching by what he was doing and saying, and like constantly, you can almost like picture how transformative was that moment when Jesus incarnated here for that few years. And this passage is really interesting because it talks about, it's called the disturbed educator. And I'll summarize the story for you. So at that time, Andrew was talking to Jesus in one of those gatherings, right? They had, but they would sit down and do this small group seminar, right? Like we do in university. And they were having this small group seminar, and Jesus would always teach with a story. And the story is about this educator that was invited to come and help those who were going to heaven, right? So imagine like these people were discarnating, right, to going to the spiritual world. And the angels at the time explaining, they'll say, there's a very strong individual in the reparation services, right? Or they would readjust people, right, that needed to continue their journey to heaven, let's say, right? And they started to bring people to this individual, this educator, and he was very tough. He would help many people, but he will help, and according to the story, he had a hammer, he had tools, he had like a very hard way of helping these individuals that are discarnating, right? And then there's a part of the passage that says the divine messenger was pleased that he was helping and asked, for example, an old woman that was really wanted to go to the heavenly world, to the court of heaven. And then the individual, the disturbed educator, indifferent to the groans of the old woman, stout worker imposed healing discipline on her, in a very aggressive, harsh way. Gradually got her in shape to continue her ascending realms. And then they continue. The repairman, or the educator, didn't hesitate. Completely deaf to any unfortunate complaints of people that are going through a hardship to adjust themselves to the perfection. He continued putting on a very hard punishment to these individuals in a way to help them continue to heaven. It is almost like he was trying to reconstruct or readjust these individuals, but using a hammer as a tool. So one day, after doing this, everybody asking for forgiveness and kindness, and he was constantly just hammering everybody. And then one day, it was his turn. The same angels came to him and said, now, listen, our educator, this is your turn now to continue your process to heaven. And then he looked at himself, and he looked at his feet. They're all, imperfect. His body was imperfect. His thoughts were imperfect. He was now the one that needed to continue that journey. So then the angel said to him, well, recognizing that you're the individual who's readjusting people. So how about you do it yourself? So he tried. He got the same hammer he used to hammer out all the imperfections of everyone else, and now he's hitting on himself. He couldn't do it. Right? And then as it says in the passage here, so the disciplinarian, him, began the task of self-betterment, hopeful and optimistic, like we all do. Let's new year, new life. Let's continue this journey, right? However, his old hammer now wounded his own flesh so roughly that instead of mending and fixing things, it fell to the floor like paralyzed in blindness and pain. And then instead of just being willing to move forward, he went into speaking blasphemies, spewing insults at God, he became paralyzed and unable to bear the treatment that he was doing to everyone else. He couldn't do it on himself, right? So after that, his old hammer that he tried, right? So then Jesus said at the end to Andrew at the time, let us use patience and love in all our tasks of correction. Let us learn to bear the measures in which we seek to improve the position of those around us. Because every spirit, time will come that we must be effectively and safely polished up to go and move towards perfection. So this is a very interesting passage because we can connect this to so many different things in our lives, right? So many other teachings from Jesus, right? How do we see how we're having a hard time seeing our own ginormous imperfections, but we're so good at spotting out the tiny little spot in someone else, right? How are we so hard judging the next one, and we're so light looking at our own mistakes? Maybe it's part of our self-preservation system. Maybe it's our superego that takes over. Maybe our systems that we create to protect ourselves, but we do that every day. It's hard. It's hard if we really had like the disturbed educator, if he really had to see what he was doing to everyone else on himself, he could not bear it. Now, this is for us now. We're talking about today kindness and hope. And if you think about it in every day, in this time of year that we're all collectively united in this idea that renewal is coming, how about we start to look in ourselves and how we treat and how we do things with others? How do we judge? How do we try to correct others, right? It happens all the time, like work is a great place for this to be seen, right? How easy it is to be in a meeting and we're so good at spotting out, oh, that's a mistake. Oh, you're doing it wrong. Oh, that. But we are doing sometimes far worse things. But we tend to think that we're really good all the time. And yes, we are good. But we use different measures and balances to compare and do and judge and see things and do things. We all going to be polished up, and as Jesus is saying here, to the divine light. In other words, we always going to go through our steps to get there. But kindness and patience and love, as Jesus says at the end, is really the measure we should use for everyone, including ourselves. Because being hard on ourselves all the time also does not help. We have to self-forgive. We have to reflect on who we are. We have to also know who we are in order to be able to know what can we do better. Right? And now you can think about your own experiences and how many times you're in a scenario that you're looking around you and everybody seems to be wrong. This is exact time that you were probably the one that is wrong most of the time. Most. But we can't see that. We develop this paralyzing blindness, just like the educator did when he started to hammer himself. He couldn't do it. He's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. But, Jesus brings this so many times, like another example. So in Matthew, he's going to say, do not judge so that yourself might not be judged, right? Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Remember that? He was talking, that's an interesting passage. We're going to read about it in a second, right? So in other words, do not judge that yourself might not be judged. So you'll be judged according to what you have judged others. The same measure will be used to you as you used on them. That's now in the gospel, right? Same idea. Or when you go to John, when he's talking about the young woman that's about to be stoned to death, right? And again, this woman lives in a very, very male dominant, misogynistic society, which is not very different from what we are today, although we've been improving. But you can see the trend continuing, right, over thousands of years. And then she's brought into the street, and that was the punishment at that time. So the whole concept here, they'll say, you know, they were testing Jesus to see what he was going to do, if he's going to break the law or not. Sure, that temptation was there all the time to try to force something. But more importantly than that, it's one of the most powerful lessons you can probably get from the gospel at that time, right? Because when the woman comes and it's put out in the middle of this is in the middle of the street, right? And everybody, males primarily, females too, but mostly males, will start with this, the judgment, the punishment, right? And the whole concept here is that she has betrayed her husband or did something, some sort of an adultery. We don't know. We don't know the evidence of what happened at that time, right? And there's a very good chance that the story is much more complicated than that, but we don't know. Let's say we don't know what happened. So Jesus knew everything because he could tell, like by the thoughts of everyone that were around. And then instead of saying anything, he said, you know, let the one that has no sins here, that has not done anything wrong, just start casting the stones. Let's do it. Go for it. Right? You're so good at judging, right? Let's do it. So everybody walks away. Right? We know what happened. And then he turns to the woman and said, well, where are the accusers? I don't see anyone. You're good to go. Right? But do no more. Stop doing the mistakes. He says, "So sin no more." Right. So in other words, continue your progression. Right, which is the message to all of us. So this is indeed very similar to the idea of the educator that we talked about in the Gospel, in Jesus in the Home. But now even more closer to us, to think about how many times we're watching TV and we're not saying anything, but we're thinking. And what we're thinking sometimes is exactly what this gentleman were doing in the street that day. And you know what? We, for almost all the time, will consider ourselves to be fine doing that. It's fine to watch a TV news and project a punishing thought on whoever's showing up there doing whatever it is. We develop this visceral energy that comes inside of us, go through our thoughts, and we project onto that individual. That is our stone. We're throwing stones at people all the time. But we're stuck in looking at the stone that they were picking up on the ground. We're stuck there. So we're like, I don't throw stones at anyone. What are you talking about? When was the last time you picked up a stone and threw someone? I didn't do it. I don't remember. Maybe when I was a kid. I don't know. Maybe I did it when I was a kid. But the mentor's saying I did. So I did. Let's say I did. Did it before. Sorry. But think about it. We're looking at that passage and we're so stuck in like 5% of the content. But we're doing it. But we're doing it in a modernized area. We do it when we post something on social media. Oh, yeah, we're doing it. You see a news or something, flash, a comment. You see a comment. You connect to it. You develop that same visceral reaction of punishment, judgment. You put that in your fingers and you type it. And that you hit send. The send is the stone. It hits the person. And you're going to say, oh no, Marco, but I'm just putting my own comment. No, the energy that you project on that story will physically hit the individual that is going through it. It will. That's what Spiritism teaches us. We know for a fact that thoughts are real. They're vital. They're visible. They surround us. We can project that. We can send darts through our thoughts. And then you're going to say, I don't really believe that. Oh, yes, you do. Just walk around someone that's talking negative things or thinking about negative things towards you. You feel it. It's like, weird. Feel it. Now, the thing about thoughts, though, is that they can travel any distance in no time because they're not bound by the laws of our own energy. They're not bound by the laws of light, for example. So they're there. So you project a thought, you actually hit someone with a stone if it's a negative one. If you send a comment, the same. Now, here's the interesting thing about this story. Whatever you throw in that thought, that message, that idea, it will hit right back at you. That's how it is. You think you're doing it, and you're sending your comment out, and you're like, oh, I'm cool. I'm fine. I'm so morally elevated. I can actually judge someone from my computer and send my judgment out, and everything will be fine. I'm here morally. Now think about this. No. Whatever you're connecting to, you're vibrating the same energy. If you're seeing someone who's doing something negative to another person, the first thought that should come is like, well, of course, that's not a good thing. Like, feel it. Connects to us, right? Like, I feel so bad. But the second thought that has to come is like compassion and kindness to everyone involved. Whatever it is, whatever that person do that is bad, they're going to deal with the consequences of that. Now, does that mean I'm going to be friends with the bad guys? No, that does not mean that. What it means is that we have to think. So if Jesus was able to make all of those gentlemen walk out and do not cast a single stone because they reflect on themselves, why can't we do that when we're, doing our daily things? Kindness. And then there's the next thing. Someone's going to come and say, wow, you're such a kind person. Look, you're kind to your kids. But I yell at the next person just off the street, like 2 feet away from me. What kindness is that? It's all bias. It's not real kindness. Your kindness to the ones you select. What kindness is that? So that's the opposite of Jesus is telling us. But we're doing it and we're thinking that that's really cool. I'm such a nice person, right? I'm kind with these 3 people here, right? And then the next person down, like, who are my neighbors? That's a question. This is the gospel. Who are my neighbors? My neighbors is only my little guy there. Everyone here. But they're like, oh, everyone here, sure, I'm friends with everyone. No, but the guy there too. And the other one there too. The guy that cut me off today this morning coming here, he's my neighbor too. If I project the worst type of anger and revenge at him in my thoughts, am I making a positive difference on anything? Do I make it drive better? Well, we do that. Don't we? We do it. That's our stone. We picked it up inside of us. It's here. And we throw it with our thoughts. They feel it. So what I'm doing there is making it worse. And you're like, oh, you're making it worse for the others. No, we're making it worse for us. They, most of the time, don't feel it. They have their own way of disconnecting. We all have our ways of disconnecting, right? To that energy. So that's an important message. Right? We can continue. So we can think about, okay, how can we start to make it, how do we start to change this, right? That's the next question. And I really, really like the story of Paul and Stephen. But, of course, Paul is, let's say, the main character of the story. And it's, we know his transformation. We know when he touched Jesus. We know when he got blind because of it. We know that how much he rethought his whole existence in one life. How many people can do that? Like, you come in one incarnation, and you're like banged in the face, you're like thrown on the ground, you like make yourself blind because of the light, and then you actually do everything you can to be the best person in the world possible. Right? That's amazing. But we don't talk about Stephen, right? And if you guys go back into the story, and then obviously I don't have enough time, I wish I could, to talk about the whole story. But much before even Saul gets in the story, where we're hearing about the story of this beautiful family, Jezreel, Jochebed, and Abigail. And this is a normal family living a normal life in the outskirts of Corinth, right? In the year 34. And in every other city, there's little town, there's a small city with people living around it. Same story, right? There's farms around it. Not very different from 2 hours away from here in Canada, right? And Licino Musiu he was an admin from the Roman Empire at the time in the city, and of course, things were not as democratic as we expected, or maybe it is a little bit of a reminder of what's happening now. Anyways, yes, maybe it is. But there's a lot of arbitrary decisions and things that happened that everybody got really upset about. And Jochebed, which was a religious man but had no faith, ended up losing everything he had, right? Lost everything he had because of many issues, right, with Licinius. And then one day, going back home, Jochebed is the father of this family of 2 kids, trying to make a living, loses his properties, walking down the road, see this, nice crops from Licinius in a farm. In that moment of anger, he picks up his stone. Right? He picks it up. His stone was to put on fire the property of Licinius. Just put fire on it. I'm angry. I'm revolted. I don't like it. This is bad. Right? So he was judging. He was full of rage and anger. He picked up his stone of rage at that time. Right? Exactly the same way they were trying to hit the woman. Exactly the same. They take their rage. They're trying to destroy it. He takes his stone, which in this case is fire, and sets fire on the property of Licinius. One of his slaves dies in the fire. And of course, he's seen doing it. So now Licinius knows who did it. So Jochebed goes home, right? Complaining, right? And all of that. There's a big fire. And then Jezreel, his son, is walking by the same road, sees a fire. So Jezreel could pick up a stone too. He could say, hey, wait a minute, let me put more fire on this thing. This guy's really, really bad, by the way. Right? Throwing darts, right? No, he's like, there's a fire. I'm gonna go and help put the fire out. So he actually goes, his son goes in, helps put fire out. And not only that, helps all the slaves that were involved in it. He fixed the whole thing. Goes home, and they're all arrested now, right? Because they know, of course, who did it. So if you think about Jezreel's perspective, like, he's doing everything right. He's like putting out the fire, helping out, trying to help his dad, his sister, who is going to be by herself. But he's also apprehended, and he also goes to the judge to be judged by, of course, the admin from the Roman Empire, the proconsul. And they're all sentenced, right? And Jezreel is sentenced to be working as a slave for the rest of his life. Totally fair, right? He did nothing wrong. He could have picked up another stone. This is so bad. Oh my God. Like, I'm going to make this guy's pay. Whatever, right? No. He sent on a boat, right, to work as a slave for the rest of his life. That's it. And then during the trip, and you can imagine, you can kind of picture what is a slave boat at the time. One of the important individuals in this boat, who's traveling, obviously, is like the captain, like sitting in this beautiful place up in the boat, now develops the plague. His name is Sergio Paulo. Develops the plague. So as the plague, as you can probably imagine, you have to avoid contact altogether. It's a very difficult death, right? You would die of this multiple organ infection, and then you'd be in isolation and you'd be by yourself, and that's it. That's your destiny, right? There was nothing really to do. So Jeziel could have picked up another stone. So you know what? That's it. The guy's dying, right? It's awesome. This is the guy's punishment. No. He actually goes there and say, I'll take care of you myself. So I'll risk my own life to take care of the person who I'm actually being captive on the slave boat. And he does. So he takes care of Sergio Paulo every single day of the trip. Sergio Paulo recovers. And because of that, they made an arrangement to release him, right? And that was near dropping. He's released to say, you know what? Let's pretend you're not in this boat and throw him over, right? He goes into the beach, and then he starts walking, and then eventually he's going to stumble at the house of the way, where now Peter, Andrew, we're all working, right? And then seeing himself in that place as the slave that's being punished and tortured, he never picked any stones. He continued his constant work on kindness and hope and progress and doing everything he could at every single step. He finally found his place. And his place was to use that to transform not only his existence, but the existence of the entire community of early Christians that now, that's why we're here today. So his decision to not pick any stones along the way allowed us to know what we know and be where we are, because he was instrumental into the early steps of Christianity. He was the binding force between many of the disciples that were kind of, we know Andrew was like moving another way. Peter was having a hard time keeping it up, right? This is tough. Imagine you're early Christian that all you can hope is that no one's going to kill you in the most barbaric way for believing in Jesus. That's really what they were doing now. And taking care of the wounded and the sick. And then, when he meets, he continued to evolve and, talk about Jesus. And, he was obviously a super well-evolved spirit. Paul is going to condemn him to death, and he dies by stone. And then Paul finally realizes that his sister Abigail is that the person he was in love with. And that's an interesting story. He could have picked up another stone as a spirit, right? Think, wait a minute, I did everything. You killed me. Now you wanted to be with my sister. Like, what's going on? What happens then? He doesn't pick up any stones. He becomes the mentor, spiritual mentor of Paul. He becomes the spiritual mentor of the individual that actually set him to death. That's Stephen. Yes, Paul's story is beautiful, but it would not have happened without the support of Abigail and Stephen. Abigail comes back to Paul afterwards and says, "Get up, Saul." This is how he's Saul still. That's Stephen. Sorry. Stephen said to him, "What is this? You weep?" That's the spirit coming back to Paul at the time. Then Abigail asked him, "Would you feel so discouraged when your task has just begun?" She asked Paul. Right? And then Stephen comes back and tells him, "Saul, do not stay stuck in the past. Whose the world is exempt from wrongdoings? Only Jesus was sinless. Let's move on with kindness." Right? With kindness. So this is probably one of the most incredible, powerful stories that is actually not only a real story, but has a factual, historical context that is undeniable, and it's rich, and you can read and you can learn dramatically from it. But then some of us are going to say, but you're talking about Stephen, like, come on, right? Right? So that's why God did something really cool. He allowed us to develop scientific methods to do things that now we believe. Because you can isolate yourself from this well-known spirit and say, well, these guys are really too good. Like, I'm not there, right? It's like, oh, come on, right? Or he can God allow us to get teachings and learnings like the one we're having now, where we can learn little steps that will lead us that way. But interesting, I'm a scientist by training. I like that. So I did a very small search on, and this is not a paper or anything, I was just kind of having fun and reading some things about kindness and consequences, because that's what the story is talking about, right? A continuous stream of kindness will lead to a continuous stream of further progression in your life, right? So there's a study which is interesting. It's a Do Good, Leave Well study, right? And they did an online survey of 4,500 American adults 18 years of older or older. So most of them were volunteers. They worked more than 100 hours per year in volunteering. And 68% of volunteers agree that volunteering has made them feel physically healthier. Wait a second. Right. That's kind of, so you're trying to say that being kind and helping another person will actually make me feel better. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Because that's exactly what Jesus is telling us, right? That's exactly what the basis of the entire gospel sits upon, is the idea of love your neighbor, right? Like you expect to be treated the same way, right? 92% said that volunteering and helping others enriches the senses of purpose in life. 89% has improved sense of well-being. 73% lower stress levels. 96% makes them feel happier. And they were like, oh, I don't know what to do. So much stuff in my life, right? I deal with that. My kids sometimes are like, Daddy, oh my God, Daddy, I'm so tired today. I don't know what to do, so bored. I'm like, there's this entire world out there that needs us, right? But we need to get moving. We need to stop picking up the stones all the time. We keep them, we carry them on us. Like, it makes us heavy. And we keep throwing them at people all the time through different means, technological means now. In the past, they actually had to pick a stone. Now we can do it from our computers or our phones or our watches. I don't know if you have a fancy watch. You can actually say, you're such a bad person. Send. Done. That's your stone. Went out. Right? So 77% of the individuals that were doing volunteering more than 100 hours a year described that improved emotional health, improves recovery from loss and disappointments. So do you want to feel better? Make another person feel better. That is crazy. But that's fact. You can't deny it. You can't fight it. And if you're not religious, like, I don't like believing gospel things, okay, fine. Read science. It works the same way. It's the same knowledge. It's coming from the same source. Right? What else? There's more. Okay? I like this study. This study is published in Science in 1980. And I really like to talk about this study because it changed the way we do science today, and it kind of started on that. And that's a study by Cornhill's group. So it's Levesque and Cornhill, published in 1980. So what they're doing, basically, they're looking at rats, like lab rats, right? And they're looking at the effects of a high-fat diet and cholesterol levels, like something that we kind of now know, but they were actually discovering that in the 1980s, right? So they were doing this controlled experiment. So there's a group of animals that have high-fat diet. There's a group of animals that have normal diet, right? To make it simple, right? And they were looking at, there's multiple replicates, right, of groups that had high-fat diet versus controls. One of the groups that had the high-fat diet showed 60% less cholesterol than the other groups that had high-fat diet. So that's kind of really strange in a controlled environment, right? If you're treating all the groups exactly the same, you expect that will have the same results, right? When you're doing lab experiments. So they're controlled, right? There's very little variables that make it different. But one of the groups stand out significantly. So this group was so different that they were actually pairing with the control rather than the treatment group, right? They were really different, really improved, 60% improvement. So the author, with his Cornhill, Frederick Cornhill, he started like, we have to figure out what's going on with this group. Maybe they thought, maybe the food was not correct, right? They thought they were doing a high-fat diet, but they were not. No, the food was the same. They could try to control everything. Is it in the same housing place? Yeah, same housing place. They switched it around. Same. There's no difference, right? The only difference was the person that took care of the animals. That group had a different caretaker than others, right? And the lab assistant that took care of these animals, she would take each one of the animals, pat them, make them happy, and put them back again. So she would take care of the rats with kindness, different than the other groups. So they thought at the time, and this is a good story, because they thought, this makes no sense. We're going to repeat the experiments. So they blinded it, and they put one group under the care of this person again, doing the same technique. Now they're blinded. They don't know which group she's working on, right? So they get the results. They unblind it. Guess what happened? Same results. So the animals that had a better, they call it social environment. The animals that had a better social environment had less effects from the high-fat diet than the other animals. So in other words, kindness saves the day again, even in rats. Right? And they're like, oh, this is like brainless. So, no, rats are cool. Actually, they are like cats. They're really fun. They're friends. They connect. They know you. Yeah, it's true. You open the cage. I work with them. They know who you are. You can, crowders know that too. They're really cool to work with, right? And mice are different, but rats are really cool animals to work with. Okay. All right. There's more. Okay. There's a interesting study by Schwartz. It says altruistic social interest behaviors are associated with better mental health. What is the word for altruistic social interest behaviors? Kindness and charity. Altruistic social behaviors. In other words, you're working for others. Okay. So they've analyzed a random sample of 2,000 members of a church, a Presbyterian church in the States. And the purpose was to look at whether the altruistic behaviors or kindness, charity, kind of working for others, right, were associated with better health, right? So after they adjusted for everything, the age, gender, stressful events, income, general health, religious coping, and all of that, asking God for helping and helping others were more associated with improved mental health than receiving. In other words, to donate is better than to receive. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? They have better mental health status on the questionnaires, right? So giving help was more significantly associated with better mental health status than receiving help, right? In that particular cohort in the church. Okay. There's more. There's a study that's very interesting called Forgiving Leads to Improved Health. So this is by Lawler, 2003. And they looked at the idea of forgiveness, right? So the study suggests that the possible mechanism through which the unforgiving responses or grudges, right, may erode health, and comparing to forgiving responses that may enhance health, right? And they look at heart rate, blood pressure. They look at a bunch of other metrics, and all the individuals who have a more forgiving behavior versus that a chronic unforgiving behavior had better status in every test they've done. Now let's go back to Luke. Matthew says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for those who despise you and persecute you. Why is Jesus saying that? And then you're going to argue, oh, these are different. No, this is exactly the same. This means do not pick that stone. Don't do it. Because if you're doing it, you're the one that's going to suffer the most. 100% of the time. There's no doubt about it. Every time you send in that dart, mental dart, it's coming back to you. Period. It may not come immediately. You may not feel it right away, but it will come back to you. Every time you're sending out kindness, positive thoughts, supportive ideas, you receive the same. That's exactly what Matthew's saying. That's what Luke wrote. That's what Jesus told him. And that's what Andrew got from the tormented educator. Remember? Right? That's the same. Okay? And just to finish now, because we've been about time now, 45 minutes in. So the gospel according to Spiritism says, there's a passage on chapter 17 that we all know that. We probably, anyone in Spiritism has probably had a chance to read or hear or see this at any time, right? But it's a good reminder, right? Because we can do all of this here and feel like there's just so much to do. I feel discouraged. I feel like I can't do this. This is too much, right? Can't be perfect. All those thoughts come to our mind sometimes, right? But then come the spirits when Kardec was writing the book and says, and then Leckendijk writes that the true spiritists or the true Christians, let's put it this way, that's even more open, okay, are recognized by their moral transformation, the efforts they make to overcome their evil inclinations. So everybody knows that, it's not about us tomorrow being a completely new transformed person. Paul did that. See, that he flipped the thing in a lifetime. But we know for a fact that for us, it's a journey, and the journey needs us to continue moving all the time, every day. And we're gonna be doing trials. That's the world we live in. We live in a world of trials. So yes, there's gonna be trials everywhere. And we need to keep moving. Don't pick up that stone. Put it away. Move on and keep doing. Because the consequences will come, and the consequence of good things will be good. That is a fact. We cannot deny that. Science already shows that. There's no question. So the effort you make shows you who you are. Because no one is perfect yet. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you for this time. So we have just a couple minutes for questions. Anyone on the internet, Chavo? No? We're good? Any comments, questions, suggestions, stones? I don't know. It's like
I do have I don't know a question. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. I was very intrigued by the fact that the first Christians, they use they didn't have the term Christian.
Yes.
This came, I think, 150 years.
Oh yeah, much later. Yeah.
But they use Casa Caminho.
Yes, Casa Caminho. Yeah, House of the Way. Yeah.
House of the Way.
Yeah.
I never realized too much why is that. I think we just censored. I think.
Yeah.
Just.
Oh yes.
What is your opinion?
That's a great question. So historically, right after, because this is now 35, so this is just a couple years after Jesus discarnated, right? So maybe a year or two after, right? So remember that there was around the same time that they started to have a much intimate connection to their spiritual guides, right? They started to, and they describe it, talking in languages and, giving things. And, there's many more references to spiritual guidance during that time, right after Jesus discarnated, right? Pentecostes, right? We call it. And they scattered, but that was part of kind of the plan, right? Because the idea was just to go, right, and deliver this. But they didn't have the resource. They didn't have like a textbook of, how to talk about Jesus. Like, they don't have that, right? What spiritism, right? So they carry their own stories. So the only way for them to deliver that was to go out to the people and deliver that, right? And it's interesting because along the road, right, where the house the way it is, that was one of the main hubs of connections to the cities at that time in Jerusalem, right? So they found safe grounds to help the poor, help people in need, and actually start the process of passing on that information. So that house represented that beacon where from there they started their journeys. So they planned their trips from that place, which was their safe, protected area. Most likely, there's a whole spiritual guidance behind protecting just like here, right? There's mentors, like they come in, they select the area, they clean the area, they protect the site, they bring people in that need help. Nothing happens by chance, right? So most likely, that was part of that early plan from the spirituality, right? To set up some sort of a home base. And they describe it in Paul Stephen, right? Of how they would start the journeys out from that area and back, right? So it's like let's say the first spiritual center kind of thing, you know. That's the same setting they had, similar to what we do, but without any print text. They had people that had little stories about happened in the past, and they would collect them, right? And Stephen talks about this, you know, having access to parts of the written work by other people that had to be copied by hand, you know. So that was the initial hub, basically. Yeah.
I like what you said about Christians are recognized by their path of trying to improve themselves.
Their efforts, yeah. That's it, right? Because it's like, if you set your goal to be perfect now, then all you're gonna do is set yourself for incredible stress and failure, right? Because you can't, right? And if you keep setting that goal, the more we're gonna fail, because you're like, oh, I can't do it, so I'll give up at some point, right? No, I don't want to do it. I can't do that, right? And that's the challenge reading books like you read about the spirits, and you're like the spirits are so incredible, right? You're like, oh, I can't do that. You know, it's like it's an automatic response, right? But you know, it is in the effort, right, that leaves the key, right? And the goal will be guaranteed. The final is going to be guaranteed, because we know no matter what, we're all going to be perfect. How cool is that, right? So it's like, you know, whether do it the easy way, the hard way, the fast way, the slow. That's now what we're doing, basically, deciding how effective we're going to be in doing that, right? So, yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. That's amazing. We're going to continue on with the passes now. We're going to call the kids. Yes.
All right. I just want to say thank you very much, Mark, for the lecture. Thank you to all of you who are with us over the internet, and hoping to see you next Sunday again. Remember, the next Sunday is going to be our last lecture of the year. Okay. Thank you very much.